Welcome to the Joshua Ngoma podcast for spiritual inspiration and Africa's strategy positioning in global politics.
The future is African. Over the next 35 years, Africa will experience a radical shift in its demographics. The projections are that the future of humanity will become increasingly African. Between the years 2015 and 2050, more than half the projected 2.2 billion increase in the world population is expected to take place in Africa. Based on current trends, within 35 years, it is expected that 1 in every 4 people will be African, and this number will increase to 4 in 10 people by the end of the century. Nearly 2 billion babies will be born, and the continent's population will double in size. The under 18 years population will increase by 2/3 to almost 1 billion children, and this projected trend is based on high fertility rates and rising numbers of women of reproductive age. On the African continent alone, we are a population of more than 1 billion people, making us the world's second most populous continent after Asia. By its sheer size, Africa is actually larger than the land masses of the United States of America, China, India, Mexico, Peru, France, Spain, Papua New Guinea, Sweden, Japan, Germany, Norway, Italy, New Zealand, the UK, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Greece put together. It also lists the top 100 countries in the world in terms of the biggest land size after Russia, Canada, China, the United States, and Brazil, which make up the top 5. Africa is perhaps the richest and most endowed continent in terms of its natural resources. If all the African countries were a single nation, they could make up the 4th largest economy in the world. The top 10 African economies have an aggregate gross domestic product, GDP, of about $5 trillion in 2022. The continent has a potential critical mass of a domestic market in excess of 900 million people. But Africa is not a single homogeneous state. It is home to at least 3,000 distinct ethnic groups or tribes. It is a continent comprising a mixed bag of 54 different countries, with the latest addition of South Sudan as an independent nation on July 9, 2011. Africa is also a continent of many contradictions. It has some of the fastest growing and progressive economies, and it is also home to some of the poorest countries classified as basket case. Some countries are flourishing democracies, while others are governed by outright dictatorships. It is now estimated that over 31 million Africans live outside their home countries in recent history, making migration a vital lifeline for the continent. African governments can do more to realize the full economic benefits of the phenomenon of migration by building a strong collaboration with their citizens abroad. The old school of thought has always viewed Africans abroad negatively as a brain drain on the continent's development. And yet, some Africans are able to make better and meaningful contributions without necessarily being physically resident in their countries of origin. Patriotism ought to be judged by the positive contributions they make in the countries of origin and not merely on the basis of their willingness to repatriate home. The UN Agency for Refugees, UNHCR, estimates that in 2023 alone, 186,000 boat people have made the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean Sea to find a better life in Europe. This surge in some instances represents an increase of about 300% on some routes compared to the previous year. 2,500 have perished while attempting to get to Italy, Greece, Spain, or Malta. Many of the refugees and migrants travel mainly from North African nations like Libya and from war-torn areas in Eritrea and Syria. They pay smugglers their hard-earned life savings in order to make the risky journey in horrid conditions for a better life in Europe. They are loaded on overcrowded and seaworthy boats without basic supplies of food, drinking water, and emergency life jackets. About 11,000 need to be children, the majority of which are either unaccompanied or are separated from their families. The UNHCR has issued a timely warning urging the Europeans to make urgent action to stop this catastrophic journey from getting worse. The size of the tens of millions of African migrants scattered around the world is even larger when we account for unrecorded and second and third generation migrants. Africa can leverage more than 100 billion United States dollars a year to help develop the continent from its migrant population. And here is how. The World Bank estimates that $53 billion in remittance flows, a surge of 6%, hit sub-Saharan Africa in 2022 alone. The top 10 countries annually in billions of dollars in ascending orders are the DRC 1.7, Algeria 1.8, Senegal 2.5, Zimbabwe 3.1, Tunisia 3.1, Kenya 4.1, Ghana 4.7, Morocco 11.2, Nigeria 20.1, and Egypt 28.3 billion. In addition to personal remittances, potential contributions by migrants come from collective remittances such as philanthropy, knowledge exchange, increasing trade links, and by better access to foreign capital markets. Additionally, an estimated $53 billion is in diaspora savings and can also be tapped for investment in the form of low-cost project finance. If well tapped, this huge and on the most part an educated group of Africans can act as an immense resource of reverse brain drain in terms of expertise, investment, and tourism. Enough evidence suggests that migration and remittances reduce poverty in the origin communities. It also leads to increased investments in health, education, housing, capital, trade, knowledge, and technology transfers. In recent history, 70% of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, particularly the poorest, moved to other countries within the region. More than 90% of migrants from North Africa move away from the continent. The most common destinations for African migrants are France, 9%, Cote d'Ivoire, 8%, South Africa, 6%, Saudi Arabia, 5%, and the United States and the United Kingdom, 4% respectively. The Kenya government has embraced the near 4 million Kenyans that live outside Kenya as partners of development and does not malign them as traitors who ran away. In fact, the government encourages more of its citizens to go and work abroad and earn in hard currency. Kenyans abroad remit about 4.1 billion United States dollars annually, and the Kenya government has created a diaspora office as a major portfolio under the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The diaspora's office mission statement states in part, the government of Kenya recognizes the significant contribution of Kenyans living abroad to its national development agenda. This is further exemplified by Kenya's development blueprint, the Vision 2030, which envisages engaging in the diaspora in various activities of the nation, building through the pursuit of a comprehensive strategy as one of the flagship projects under the financial sector. In this regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has incorporated diaspora diplomacy as one of the key pillars in its ministerial strategic plan. To accomplish this, the ministry has established a fully fledged directorate of diaspora affairs that has a mandate to harness the potential of the Kenyan through networking and information sharing. The Directorate of Diaspora Affairs is mandated to provide advice to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government at large in the formulation of relevant policies affecting Kenyan diaspora, developing and implement programs that promote their interests, serve as a forum for enhancing their social, economic, and cultural ties with Kenya, and provide liaison services with appropriate government and private agencies. The government of Kenya believes that the Kenyan diaspora is an important part of the society considering their large numbers, considering approximately 10% of the current population of 55 million are in the diaspora. Lesotho's population is approximately 2 million people, and an estimated 240,000 is outside the country, acting as a labor reserve of migrant workers who serve primarily the South African mining industry. As a result, Lesotho is ranked among the top 4 countries across the globe receiving remittances that exceed foreign direct investment, FDI, and official development assistance. In 2022, remittances from workers outside Lesotho accounted for 25.7% of the country's gross domestic product. According to the World Bank, Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the few regions in the world where official development assistance is larger than remittances, but remittances are much more stable than either foreign direct investment or private financing flows. Many countries in the region have large numbers of their respective populations living overseas, with substantial diaspora savings that could be mobilized for development financing. For example, Nigeria was ready to issue a diaspora bond to mobilize diaspora savings and boost financing for development. Nigerians abroad remit $20.1 billion every year back to their homeland. Africa suffers from a vicious cycle of human capital, and immigration is a revolving door. Many Africans, after they have attained an education, work experience, and entrepreneurial skills, are returning to their homeland to establish their careers and start new businesses. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Sub-Saharan Africa is now the second fastest growing economic region in the world, trailing only after the continent of Asia. Over the last decade, real income per person across the continent has increased by more than a third. Foreign direct investment, FDI, has quadrupled and is responsible for supporting these gains. Favorable commodity prices, improved macroeconomic management by governments, debt reduction programs, the discovery of new oil reserves and new communication technologies are also contributing factors. A sharp rise in demand in metals such as copper, cobalt, manganese, lithium, and aluminum, which are key elements in electric vehicle technology, is a boon to the continent's economy. As a consequence, Africa's forecast of its gross domestic product, GDP, indicates a rise by an average of 3 to 4% a year for the next 10 years. Africa has a very rich heritage and history. Some of our history can be unsettling and painful. The late Maya Angelou said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." We confront this painful past in order to understand that Africa's present day condition is intimately connected to our past, and that a series of historic events and steps explain how we got to our present condition. However, our discourse on Africa's past should neither be degraded to a blame game, or should we suffer from the paralysis of political correctness to the extent that we entirely avoid talking about it. Reconstruction comes by confronting the deep scars of the past, learning from those experiences, and making sure we do not repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Above all, we must always forge ahead for a much more open, humane, and prosperous Africa. Africa requires its own identity. Africa's solutions are not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. However, some collective countries and regions may face certain unique challenges common only to those areas, and the solutions will be consequently similar. In general terms, failures and successes would apply to the rest of the continent. We should resist the temptation of either analyzing Africa's plight or glamorizing its potential. Instead, we need to rethink solutions that work in our interest while pursuing competitive strategies that bring relevance, dignity, and upward economic mobility for the whole continent in the global scheme of things. Dr. Maya Angelou once said, "For Africa to me is more than a glamorous fact, it is a historical truth. No man can know where he is going unless he knows exactly where he has been and exactly how he arrived at that present place." Before COVID-19 global pandemic, 7 of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world were African countries, namely Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, Ghana, the Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Nigeria. Many foreign investors have been forced to turn away from their traditional investments and are now looking closely towards opportunities on the continent of Africa. In 2024, Nigeria had the highest number of tech setups at over 3,000, followed by Egypt with around 2,000 and Kenya with about 1,000. Additionally, a significant number of fintech startups are located in these 3 countries, with Nigeria leading the way. This is the Africa that is now becoming increasingly more attractive to its diaspora than at any given time. These growth patterns on the continent vary by region. Yet Africa's transformation into a major economic player on the global stage is far from complete. Political turmoil and instability, poor governance, and corruption are still to be expected in some regions. The irony, though, is that in spite of these setbacks, Some multinational companies are thriving in Africa. Favorable demographics and an increased sense that African business is doing more in laying a strong foundation to weather political instability are helping. United States President Barack Obama announced at the first 2014 United States Africa Leaders Summit, attended by over 40 African heads of state, a pledge of 14 billion United States dollars worth of the investment in Africa by U.S. companies in areas such as energy and infrastructure. Obama focused on programs that would increase electricity production and distribution, boost agricultural-related production, and improve the business climate. Obama's policies build on the work that his predecessors had done to foster strong U.S.-Africa cooperation. President Joe Biden followed in the same footsteps. Earlier in May of 2000, President Bill Clinton signed the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act (AGOA) to provide duty-free access to select African products onto the U.S. market. In July 2003, President George W. Bush established the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, and later the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC. In January 2004, the U.S. Congress, with a strong bipartisan support, created the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC. The MCC is a results-oriented way to deliver smart U.S. foreign assistance by focusing on good policies and country ownership. These became President Bush's flagship policies that have defined his legacy on health, development, and accountability on the continent of Africa. By September 2024, according to the Statista, a data gathering company, PEPFAR, was directly supporting 20 million people on antiretroviral drugs, ARVs, in low and medium income countries across the world, including a significant portion in Africa. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Joshua Ongoma podcast. Bye for now until next time.